Okay, so we're going to start with translating Caesaris De Bello Gallico, Book 1, Chapter 1, lines 1 through 4. I'm going to try to make this pretty quick and straightforward, so hang on tight as we get into it. So the main verb in this little portion is marked by a comma. There's no real conjunction or subjunctive verb we can see out there beyond, so we're just going to kind of call it that this is going to be a complete thought right here at this comma. So right here we're going to mark our est as our main verb, and kind of a little OCD, and kind of start with it. So a ending, this is in terms of omnius adjective, and this divisa, all seeming to be nominative feminine singular. So really those are going to be our nominatives, so we're just going to start out with those. Gaul and is, I'm going to try to keep the order that Caesar has for the most part, except for when it most absolutely has to be changed. Gaul is all, and then notice that this is, though it is a perfect passive participle from the verb divido, it is going to be just treated like an adjective without a verb, a little s behind it, as opposed to way out here in front of it. So divido, to divide, divided, so Gaul is all divided. And then we have partes, trace, and they're governed by this in, so these are really a prepositional phrase, and we're going to look at this. These are accusative plurals, so these are just going to be an into as opposed to just a plain in. And 3 right here, parts, so into 3 parts. Now for this next little piece we have this relative pronoun and this little statement over here. This is the main verb, incolent. It's plural with that nt ending, and we have an ae over here, feminine plural, for these Belgi, which are Belgians. And so the Belgians inhabit is going to be the force of this relative statement, and the pronoun governing that is going to be of which. So of which, and then unam, so one, and notice that it's in the accusative case, and it's going to be talking about which one it is where this action is taking place, of which the first part, we're just going to substitute, there's no actual partes or pars over there where it needs to be, so we're just going to substitute it in there. It's obviously talking about the first part. And then this incolent means to inhabit, so of which the first part, the Belgians inhabit. So moving right along, we have this phrase, and it's made up of just 2 words really. It's just this oleum and this aquitani, and I'd like to step back a little bit and look at the endings and how they relate to the endings in the previous phrase. And notice this nominative plural and this accusative singular. Once again, we have oleum, which is other or second in this case when we're doing this list of parts, and that's in the accusative singular, and we have this nominative plural, and so we can just kind of substitute the rest of the statement from before in kind of this parallel structure that Caesar is going to exhibit in this list. So we have the second, the Aquitanians, and then because there's no verb, we can just substitute that verb from before, because we're kind of in this list format where, once again, I'll point out these endings are parallel to those endings up there. So the second, the Aquitanians inhabit. And then I'll just go to a new line as we start this new phrase, kind of. And then we have this new phrase up here. It kind of stretches from here, and we have one word over here, and I see this main verb over here and really seeming to go far now. So this verb is appellanter, and because there's three parts and this is tertium, or three, I'd like to look at all the words in between there and here as being about the third part of it. And as well, I can see this relative pronoun that's kind of governing perhaps that verb, because we might need to substitute this statement in. And so once again we have this accusative singular, this nominative plural, and we can really just, it comes down to it, say the third, like we started off the previous two parts of Gaul, the third, then there's no really antecedent for this qui, so I'd like to make one up. Those who, and this who is going to be, and so this who is going to govern all this, and I'd like to go into that now. So appellanter, to call or to name, and it's passive, and so let's start looking for some possible subjects, and immediately I see two, and I see some more parallel structure because we have this nominative plural here and we have nominative plural here, and notice that in front of those are both accusative singulars, and I'd like to take a look at those and kind of the meaning and the context to really fit this together. And so you can say, okay, so this is NT, they are called, they are named, and we can look at this lingua, that's language, so by, with, by means of, their own, by means of the language, and look at this ipsorum, we have this genitive plural ending on this intensive pronoun, and we're just going to translate of themselves, really, so the language of themselves, by, with, by means of, the language of themselves, so those who, by, and we're going to, by the language, by, and we're going to say, instead of themselves, sounds kind of clunky, we're just going to say their, by their language. And moving right along to this Celti, this nominative plural, we're just going to put Celts. By their language Celts, those who by their language Celts, and then once again we have an adjective, but it's not, but it's missing. I'd say there's an understood lingua here, another language, but we just have this adjective, this possessive adjective. So our, by our language Gauls, and this is going to be, as opposed to Gallia, this extra I and this A, and it's feminine, we're going to have this masculine ending that's going to be talking about the people, and it's going to be talking about them in plural. Gauls, they are called. And so and looking back at this, I'd like to take a look at the structure of this, and this is talking about how there's a difference in the language, and so in their own language they're calling themselves Celts, but in our language they're calling, we call them Gauls. So the Caesar and the Romans are going to be calling them Gauls while they're calling them Celts. And I'd like to just change these by to n to make it sound a little less clunky. But it really still means we don't think of language in quite the same way we do perhaps when we're walking. We walk with our legs. We don't think of, we talk with language. We talk in language would sound a little better, so we're just going to do in instead of by there. And so moving right along, we have another statement. I'm just going to start a new line for that. And this stretches all the way to our last line down here. And this is, right here we have our main verb. And this is different. Different is going to be relative of Pharaoh, Thera. It's going to be, instead of Defero, Defera, and we're going to translate it as differ, which is obviously the derivate. The subject of this, and we're going to note this little, while I see it, this little prepositional phrase there. We have a number of these ablatives. Look at this: ablative singular, ablative plural, and they're separated by commas. It's like another little list there. And we do have this phrase, and both of these are going to have a very nominative plural sort of ending, so we're going to translate those as our subject. So these all, and these are going to be ablatives, and they all differ. And thinking about the various meanings and usages of the ablative, we're going to talk about ablative of respect. They differ in language. These all differ in language, customs. Note that this is plural, customs, and we would normally, when there's a end of a list, we'd say and, so I'll just stick that in, and laws. Finally, we have this prepositional phrase right here, and really what this is among or between themselves, and really this is next to the verb, notice, so we'll just put it next to the verb in our translation. We have to do a return. These all differ amongst themselves, and it's because it's these, we're talking about people, these ones. You can say that, substitute a little ones in there, or really you can just say they all differ amongst themselves in language, customs, and laws. So that was lines 1 to 4. I hope I did it in a reasonable amount of time. Might have been a little too fast, but I hope you enjoy, and I hope that you'll come back for more.